Good evening, everyone. With the posted time having arrived and a quorum of members present, I'll call the Finance Committee meeting for Tuesday, December 8th, 2020 to order. I will recognize that we have one member on WebEx this evening, so we will take roll call votes on our items on our agenda. The first item on our agenda tonight is the minutes of our previous meeting from 11/24 of 2020, copies of which are in the meeting packets. Any revisions or corrections to the minutes needed? If not, do we have a motion to approve the minutes? Motion by Herbst, is there a second? Second by Martins. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote on the minutes then. Martins?
Aye.
Watson?
Aye.
Herbst?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
I'll vote aye as well, and the minutes are approved. Item number 2 is discussion and possible action on intergovernmental humane officer services agreement with Everest Metro PD. You'll know for a number of years now since the creation of the animal control program, we've shared our humane officer services by contract with Everest Metro. This is a continuation of that arrangement. A copy of that agreement was in the packets. Does anyone have questions on that agreement? We do have the city attorney on with us, and we also have the deputy police chief here if anyone has questions.
I got a question.
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay, I know at the last finance meeting, we approved sending, or, using the Humane Society for impoundment of dogs. And that agreement only pertained to Wausau. And so if we provide humane officer services to the village of Weston, how does that agreement for impoundment, how is that handled with Weston? I mean, did they have their own agreement then, or what?
Go ahead, Matt.
Sure, this is about as clear as mud when you look at how we deal with animals with the Humane Society. So we have two different contracts with the Humane Society. One is called the non-dog stray contract, and that covers cats and any other animal that is defined as a stray. And I thought, what other animals could that be? Until after running that for several years, I realized pigs, guinea pigs, snakes, rabbits, you name it, are all covered under that. That is the contract that Everest Metro has backed out of for the city of Schofield, village, and town of Weston. We still have a held for cause contract that applies to both. I think it also applies to Everest, which is when we have to hold an animal either as evidence or because of maltreatment, it's part of a case. That's held under a totally different contract with the Humane Society. But the services that we provide with our humane officer as part of this contract include the investigation of dog bites, the investigation of mistreatment of animals, and then there still may be cases where humane officer will be taking an animal in a criminal mistreatment type case and have to investigate that from a criminal standpoint. So those are the services that Everest Metro is seeking from us, both in our humane officer and in we have CSO hours that apply where they also go down to the Everest Metro jurisdiction. So even though they're not going to be taking cats as strays to the Humane Society, there's still a lot of work the humane officer does there for them.
Okay, so like non-dogs, we're not impounding for the village of Weston, then I'm assuming. So if the humane officer runs into a home that's got a pet pig that's, for whatever reason, is not...
That would be a held for cause, not a stray,
Okay.
when they're in a home. So in essence, those municipalities have just decided they're not taking non-dog strays anywhere. They're just not dealing with them. They remain where they're at or in the custody of the person that has them, and that's their issue to resolve. Understand that stray dogs are still paid for and covered by the county with the Humane Society. So that's something that the humane officer would still take for Everest Metro to the Humane Society.
Okay, yeah, clear as mud.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of moving parts to it in different contracts and trying to define what's a stray versus what's a held for cause, and then the conclusion of what you do with these animals, getting them there's the easy part. It's either getting them back to their owners or having them adopted or figuring out what the resolution is.
Okay.
Just for Michael's, the county gets a portion of our dog license fees and uses that then to pay for the sheltering costs, or if a dog bites somebody's cow or kills a chicken or something, they'll compensate the owner for it. It's, so that's how they're paying for those.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it was just the mechanism with if we were providing humane services for Weston, what was going to happen to the animals then, since that wasn't covered in the contract we voted on last week. So,
Well, and most of the non-dog stray contract pertains to stray and feral cats, I think, is really the cat. It started out as being known as the cat contract until we realized there's all these other creatures that could qualify, but
It does represent about 95% of the animals taken into that contract are cats.
sure. Okay.
Okay.
So with that, do we have a motion to approve the contract? Motion by Ryan, is there a second? Second by Martins. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Herbst?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Watson?
Aye.
Martins? I'll vote aye as well, and that's approved. Item number 3 is discussion and possible action on deferral of interest and principal payments on existing city-provided loans and ground lease payments due to the city of Wausau for commercial properties and businesses for 6 months to assist small businesses who request such during the COVID-19 pandemic emergency declaration. If this item looks familiar to you, it's because we've done it before, and the pandemic is certainly not going away. So I believe we're looking for the ability to extend that help to businesses that still need it. They may not all, but I think we want that ability to work with them where it's necessary. Does anybody have questions on this particular item? If not, is there a motion to approve the extension? Motion by Ryan, second by Herbst. Further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Watson?
Aye.
Martins? Ryan?
Aye.
Herbst?
Aye.
I'll vote aye as well, and that item is approved. Item number 4 is discussion and possible action regarding the police department budget modification to transfer $91,935 from 2020 personnel budget to fund emergency preparedness equipment and radios. We'll start this item tonight by saying that I heard from the police chief this afternoon, and he has decided to take the item pertaining to non-lethal riot control equipment through committee later this month and into January, so we're not being asked to vote on that tonight. The only items that they want to make a request for tonight are the portable radios and guns. The other items will be discussed in Public Health and Safety on the 21st of December, then brought to Finance in January, and then taken to Council at the end of January, so we can have a little bit more committee and public discussion on the need and the use of those items, since that is a sensitive issue. So just with that quick update, we would subtract then $36,000 from the ask, which is the amount for that. We do have the deputy chief with us. Matt, do you want to speak to these other items? And
Sure, let me start with the easy one, which is Motorola radios. Over the last 5 years, we transitioned from Tate radios, which we found not to be effective for us in this community, to Motorola's. We generally did that through CIP requests. It was a recurring year after year. We'd purchase 10, 20 radios each year. Due to some additional positions being added and probably some bad math at that time, we ended up 5 short. Some of our Motorola radios were covered under team agreements with the sheriff's department, and then when that ended. So we still have 5 that will get us to the point of every sworn member of the Wausau Police Department will be carrying the same Motorola radio, which we find works at a much higher level. So we're asking for $18,935 to complete that project. Any questions on radios before I move forward?
no, go ahead. Head back.
I had one, and thank you for allowing me to ask. If you get the 5, it sounded like in the blurb that you were going to have just enough. Do you have some extras?
Sure. 5 does get us for 1 radio per sworn position. We still have Tate radios that we keep in reserve. We use those for emergency police. We use those for our CSOs.
So if one of the Motorola's breaks, you can haul out the Tate and you'll be okay.
Correct. The officers are told to be very careful with these because they're very expensive, and if we have to send it in for repairs, you get a Tate in the meantime. Now, for what it's worth, I have a Tate right now. Mine will be being replaced, and if they come talk real nice to me, I'd be willing to let them use my Motorola, but they'd have to talk real nice.
Excellent.
The second request is for $37,000 for us to transition from 40 caliber Glock handguns to 9mm Glock handguns. And the full disclosure of this, we're bringing this forward right now because the funds exist in our current budget year because of some COVID savings and open position savings. We can still police next year regardless of the answer to this request, but we do know that within the next 3 to 5 years, because of the changes in Glocks and their design as they move to their next generation of Glocks, it won't be a case of a want, it'll be a case of a need. It's imperative that the parts to my 40 caliber Glock handgun are interchangeable, including the magazines, with any other officer's Glock 40 caliber handgun, and that won't be the case as we move to Generation 5 Glocks. And that is the next generation that we'd be purchasing. Additionally, the move to 9mm allows, let me back up a second, all of our equipment in our holsters, which doesn't sound like a lot, but each holster is at least $100. The new 40 caliber Glocks will not fit in the 40 caliber holsters that we have, but 9mm will. The FBI and numerous other law enforcement agencies have done all the scientific research and determined that the 9mm not only is a gun that can be shot more accurately because of less recoil, but that the rounds that are made for it now are as or more effective than the rounds that we currently carry. So adding to the fact that the 9mm ammunition is cheaper than the 40 caliber ammunition that we use right now, creating a savings for us. So at the end of the day, all conventional wisdom in law enforcement and what we're seeing across our industry is a switch to 9mm handguns for a whole host of reasons. So we know we're going to need to do that within the next 3 or 4 years. It made sense to us to do it now. And lastly, if we make a purchase of our ammunition for the next several years before December 31st, we get this year pricing, due to a whole host of issues in society, the price of ammunition is being estimated to go up by 40 or 50% on January 1st because we get to buy under the state contract this year at this year's prices. And we've been warned that January 1st, when we look at the new prices, we might get a little sticker shock. So as a whole, knowing that the funds existed in this year's budget, should a budget modification be approved, we felt it prudent to do that right now out of our current budget, then come back next year or the following year through a CIP request and compete or have to have those funds come out of CIP, reducing a different opportunity for a different department.
Okay. Questions for Deputy Chief? Go ahead, Deb.
I guess I'm just concerned, is this being off topic? Because I guess I have an interest in knowing how we do looking at the budget process, and in past organizations I've worked with, when you're dealing with year-end funding and such, or going from using the surplus, I had thought in the last meetings that we had talked about, we'll look at salvage next spring, and that I've worked in an environment where if you were not using the personnel and related fringes, and that was not spent, that was it. You could not take that and use it as a budget transfer for any other purpose. So I guess I would like to see something like that, or more defined of how we look at things, because at a certain point, when it's salvage at the end of the year, it's no longer part of a specific department. It goes back specifically to be looked at as a group, and then between the different requests, the city council can decide on how is that going to be prioritized. But my main concern is, I believe, and I guess I had heard of previous councils wanting to fund personnel and fringes at 90% because there was this delay in hiring, and so that we would have the budget more in line. And I know in past years, you've sometimes had officers come in at mid-year, and so that this can happen. But I am uncomfortable of programming anything that's personnel and fringes related and putting it into other miscellaneous categories. I think it should be held off and not be repurposed in that, or that it should go over as surplus, and then the whole council decides on what the priorities are.
Go ahead, Marion.
The city's budget policy does speak to personnel line item transfers, and it does not prohibit that activity, but it does require a council and finance committee's approval. So we have, if you review our budget policy today, we have financial thresholds that say, okay, the mayor can authorize a budget modification within a department for under $5,000, and it doesn't need to go to council. But if it's coming from a personnel line item, then it must, regardless of the dollar amount, it must come to finance and council. So I think, what you're seeing, Deb, is the city has addressed that by requiring council approval, and of course, because it's a budget modification, then it requires 2/3 of the council to support that transfer. And doing the budget mod prior to year end, you must have been a fly on the wall, because that was exactly what I said to the police department. We should wait until year end. Your money is no longer your money then. It is a pool of money, and it should be prioritized accordingly. But they went on their own merry way. And so I will say that we are of one mind on that.
Well,
Well,
in
and
all
I just-
fairness to Mary Ann, we did have that conversation, and we also discussed the fact that if we are going to make this decision, which applies here, making it prior to the end of the year saves the city significant money and the resources necessary to make that change. So in this one, I can appreciate where you're coming from, Ms. Ryan, and I also respect Mary Ann, but saving thousands of dollars to not wait until after January 1st in this case just made fiscal sense to us, which is why we're here.
That does, it does make some sense. If we need to purchase a volume of ammunition for either set of weapons, and we know that that cost is going up, and we know that we have a budget surplus now, that we, depending on where we're at in 2021, with either pandemic impact or state aids, because we never know what that's going to be, that it does make some sense that we would consider this item now. I certainly can see holding off the other items that we pulled. Ordinarily, we do consider in this committee and at council carryover budget requests in the first quarter of the following year. And so, then what your 2020 final results are. In this case, though, their projected surplus is so much, and this request is such a small fraction of that, given the urgency to secure the 2020 price on the ammunition. That's, I believe, why we're here tonight, to consider this specific item. We also have a request from the fire department for a supplement coming up for a ventilator and laryngoscopes, and that's pandemic-related as well. So, I guess we'll have to make a decision. We certainly don't want to see a pattern of this where we're getting this type of request every single year. There are some mitigating circumstances, though, if what they believe is going to happen with ammunition happens, we could be out significant more money. So we'll have to make a decision either way. Go ahead, Deb.
Well, the concern I have is that I think it's happened in the past, and I understand the departments have their budget when it comes to the beginning of the year and the different categories. But at a certain point, at the end of the year, or the beginning of the new year, it is no longer part of that department's budget. And I don't know if it's been clear in the past on how the council has done it or how the department looks at it. But it just seems with the COVID, we're having one of those years where it is significant. And that we may want to do something, a big project that would help the whole city. And that I guess I'm just not comfortable to support it at this time. I just think that it should be something brought up next year. And even with a little bit of cost savings, it's that at the end of the year, it's one big pool, and it's for the whole city. And
Well,
then it will be
Right.
looked at, reviewed, and determine how that will be spent.
Right. Ordinarily with supplemental requests, we rank and score those like we do CIP. We bring them all in, we have presentations on what else we can get done with some of that money, and then we rank and score them, and then, when you run out of money, you stop selecting projects. It's kind of how we do those supplements ordinarily every year, so. Go ahead, and then Sarah needs to.
Well, I had mentioned to a couple of alderpersons that this might be, in 2011, the year to look at upgrading the rest of the city lights, street lights, and get them all on LED, because our electric lighting budget is over $500,000. And then the bulbs don't have to be replaced for 18 years. You could end up having a benefit of over, 60 or 70% reduction in future years for your lighting, and then be able to look at other possible. I know Lou has concerns about other blocks and that, and I know there's a number of categories, and I don't know if anybody really in the department wants to look at the lighting issue, but if you upgrade the lighting, it's going to be safer. It's going to be brighter, and we could, drop that annual expense by 75%. So I guess I just wanted to say a little bit more about that, and I'm not sure anybody from the departments would want to bring that up. But I think it should be something we consider.
Right.
As well as, upgrading the lighting throughout the city buildings.
We have had that discussion in CISM, and we've asked Director Lindman to look at a plan where we would maybe ramp up that lighting budget over a series of a few budgets and see if we could get to a complete change-out within 3 to 5 years. So they're working on that, actually, to not only for the energy savings, but for the increased safety and the efficiency factor. So, and Sarah Watson has her hand up. Sarah, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted clarification really quick. So the idea is that the munitions for these weapons are going to increase. Is it a known fact that they're going to increase after January 1?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the second half of that question.
Is it a known fact that the price of the ammo is going up in January?
Our experience is ammunition is very hard to come by, and our reps that sell us that ammunition stop by the police department and strongly encourage us to make any purchases prior to the end of the year, and told us that all the information they have available to us is to expect anywhere between a 30 and 50% increase in the price. But that they would honor the state pricing that expires December 31st of this year up to December 31st.
And so is this something that we could do without the radios, like hold off on the radios until the next year budget and just proceed with the firearm part?
Sure.
We could. You could make a motion to approve the guns and hold the radios over to 2021's carryover consideration.
And then I guess my next question is maybe for Mary Ann, do you know what our surplus will be at the end of the year? I know in your report it says, looks like we're doing pretty good compared to last year, but.
Sure, we are, and I know that, it was a couple of weeks ago before, it wasn't December yet when we had my conversations with the police department. So we haven't had, much of anything as far as snow is concerned, which is, always the concern, because you don't know what December is going to bring, and you don't really know how that is all going to shake out until December 31st comes around. Right now, I'm estimating about $600,000 of a profit at year end. So that's what I'm thinking.
Basically, with not considering shifting this spending?
Yes, that would be the total surplus.
Okay.
So, yes. So they're taking, their proposal was to use about 100,000 of that 600,000.
Okay. Since we have removed the non-lethal riot control equipment, though, and then assuming that if the committee pleases, it would remove the radio request. That leaves us with requests for the firearms. Does anyone want to make a motion on either those or the two items that were left originally? Sarah, go ahead.
I would make the motion to approve the budget transfer for just the handguns and only. Yes.
Okay, so just the handguns and hold the radios over to the carryover consideration?
Right.
Okay. Is there a second for Sarah's motion? Is there a second for Sarah's motion? Motion dies for lack of a second. Is there a motion then to approve both items?
I'll make a motion to approve both firearms and the Wausau.
Okay, firearms and radios. Is there a second for Mike's motion? Is there a second for that motion? There is not, so,
Second that.
okay, and second from Watson. Further discussion or questions? Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Okay, and I just got a question about, I understand the ammunition shortage because that's been a chronic issue for a long time, and it seems to have, recently have really, lifted up its ugly head again. But as for the firearms themselves, in locking in a purchase of those before the end of the year, do we see a cost savings as there's going to be, if more police departments will be switching over to, say, 9mm versus going to the next generation of Glock, would you expect there be scarcity in those, so to get your orders in now, or not so much of an issue?
I don't have an answer to that question that I could speak with any confidence. I know that firearms are in short supply right now, but, we've been dealing with a vendor that feels confident that, we'd be able to get those. So whether that order, I don't think the urgency to place that order prior to December 31st exists. If approved, we would be moving forward with either a request for proposals or getting bids from multiple distributors on those firearms yet. So the likelihood that we'd be placing an order in 2020 is very low. I would expect that would be in 2021.
Okay, and then for if the department were to stay the course with the .40 caliber, is now you said that there's incompatibilities with the Generation 5. Is that mostly just due to the holsters, or is there other things like the magazines or other parts of the weapon, or?
That's my understanding, is there have been significant changes between Generation 4, which is what we currently have, and the Generation 5 that are coming out to include the size of the magazine.
Okay.
And from a technical, if in a worst case scenario, if I'm out of ammunition and I have a Generation 4 handgun, I would like to look at my partner 10 feet away and say, throw me a magazine. And if they have a Generation 5, I want to know that it's going to work in my handgun, and that's what we don't have confidence in. So when a shift occurs to the Generation 5 handguns, we want every handgun in the police department to be a Generation 5. So they all function the exact same. They all take the same parts. And from an armor and maintenance standpoint, there's consistency, and we don't have to have two separate inventories of parts for those handguns because of the differences between them.
So either way, we would look at either replacing all handguns with a Generation 5 or all handguns with a 9mm. And replacing all handguns with a 9mm might be a better cost savings now because ammunition's cheaper for the 9mm, and we can.
Right, and we'd be replacing them with Generation 5 9mm. The issue is Generation 5 40 calibers are not compatible with our Generation 4 40 calibers that we currently have. So correct, at some point in time, in the next 3 to 4 years, we will have to change out all the handguns, regardless of which caliber it is. But the 9mm comes with benefits in performance, benefits in price of ammunition, and then buying the ammunition for those 9mm prior to December 31st represents significant savings for the city.
Okay, okay. So in essence, it could be a better long-term path to go that route than to,
That's our belief, and
Yeah.
that's why we're making this request.
okay, thanks.
Well, and the future cost of everything is greater. I mean, we look at the cost of waiting on everything from equipment to streets and roads, and obviously paying for stuff in future dollars. Most items, you pay more by waiting. Deb, did you have a last question?
Yes, I did. I had heard from some residents, and I understand by pulling some items out that may contribute to, you know, do I want to narrow the focus on this? But I guess I would just like to say, I've talked to a number of residents over the years, and one thing that's come up is that Wausau is considered the Mayberry USA in our area. And that there are some of our residents that are concerned that even with some tragic events that have happened around the country, that we're different here. And we are still small town, and that we get to know our neighbors, and where we shop, they know us by name and that. And a number of residents just are concerned that with these different purchases being considered, is it trying to take us away from that? And some people are disturbed
Sure.
by that. But I do think we have a lot of pluses with the joint task force that goes out with a counselor and an officer, what's been happening with the homeless, and the new program for the wet shelter that the police department and North Central Healthcare have been doing, and the warming shelter. So I do think we have been, with a lot of stories recently, we've heard, we have no tasers, we have no vests. We don't have these other options where we're already have that. But I guess for myself too, I do feel like we are Mayberry, and are we trying to stray into something that is going to escalate and have people think that we are becoming a mini Milwaukee, and I don't think that's the case. So I guess I just wanted to say that is a concern from a number of neighbors. Thank you.
I guess I see us as a mid-sized city with some big city problems, and I think we're quite a stretch away from being Mayberry. I think that the Wausau that I remember as a young person did not have, and that was, just in the, mid to late 80s, did not have the problems we have today. We didn't have to add police to deal with hard drugs, not just recreational drugs, hard drugs, and sold on front porches in broad daylight. We didn't have to have a safe school unit. We didn't have to have, we had liaisons, but we didn't have principals walk in kids home because they were worried about how neighborhoods are. We didn't have kids say to the principal, that's okay, I see this stuff every day, I can get myself home. I think Wausau has evolved, and I think we have to be realistic about a lot of the things that we see here. And in public health and safety, we have really, we get police reports every month, we get reports from the fire department every month. And as much as we want to think that we are a fantastic city where people know their neighborhoods, we're a kind and giving community, but we have a situation where people need to know their neighborhoods now. They need to know who belongs there and who doesn't. They need to keep an eye out on one another for one another. And, I think we've reached a point where we also have to be realistic to know that we have a lot of the same social problems here that we, 30 years ago, never thought we might have. And we have enlarged the police department in just the time that I've been on the council by, I believe, 8 officers. And, if we didn't have things to solve, I don't think we would have needed to do that. And just myself, I've been at the swearing-in of a lot of police officers because we're a young department. So it seemed for a while that I was going to a swearing-in ceremony all the time. And one of the things that I have told them when they hire on with us is that as a council, it has always been our goal to make sure that they are properly equipped and properly trained. And I don't ever want any of them to get out there and feel like that's not the case, whether it be guns, whether it be radios, whether it be safety equipment, whatever it is. And, that's part of the reason we created our equipment fund also, is to make sure that our other departments don't feel like they're ill-equipped or ill-trained to do the job that they need to do. So I don't have a problem supporting this request. I think that this is in keeping with many of the requests that we have granted before, maybe a couple months early, but, we're going to save some money and we're going to get everybody on the same page and pay for it in today's dollars versus the cost of money 3 years from now, when we're forced to do it. And then, what other opportunities would we not be able to afford because we're up to the end of the useful life? I mean, think of when we got to the end of the useful life on the breathing apparatus in the fire department. All of a sudden, they needed $250,000. Well, the rest of the CIP list pretty much fell to the cutting room floor that year because we had no choice. So I think if we can be proactive, it makes a lot of sense. Dawn?
I just want to comment, I want clarification, because first of all, I'm in favor of the guns, I'm in favor of the radios, and I'm also in favor of the ammunition. So I do believe though, Mike, was your motion just for the radios and the guns?
Correct, yeah, the firearm transition. Correct, the firearm transition, which would include the ammunition, and then the Motorola portable radios.
Right, so the only thing we took off was the non-lethal riot control equipment, which we'll deal with that in committee separately.
Absolutely, then I am definitely in favor of your motion, Mike.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor then, so let's go ahead and vote. Watson?
Aye.
Herbst?
Aye.
Ryan?
No.
Martins?
Aye.
I'll vote aye as well, and that item will pass 4-1. Thank you for that, Matt.
Thank you all.
Item number 5 is discussion and possible action regarding a budget modification to show a change of purpose for fire department CIP, to use leftover funding for laryngoscopes and to purchase an additional ventilator. You have a write-up in your packets from the fire department on this particular purchase. Does anyone have questions for Deputy Chief Bartek on this item? We have him with us. We also have the chief on WebEx if we need her.
Just for clarification, based on our budget policy, this does not need to go to council because it's a change of purpose within the CIP budget, and the finance committee has the authority to
So the
make that
committee's
recommendation.
word will take this one
Yes.
forward if we're good with it.
That's correct.
Does anyone have questions for the fire department on this item? If not, is there a motion to approve the item? Motion by Herbst, is there a second? Second by Martins. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Ryan?
No.
Herbst?
Aye.
Watson?
Aye.
Martins?
Aye.
I'll vote aye as well, and that item will pass 4-1. Yep, let's take our addendum next, just so we don't run out of time, because we can always hold the general fund financial report for our next meeting. The addendum is discussion and possible action regarding a sole source purchase of snowmaking machines, a snowmaking machine, and an associated water booster system. And we have the Parks Director with us on WebEx. You've got a little write-up in your packets regarding the uniqueness of snowmaking equipment and why they need to sole source that equipment. Does anyone have questions for Jamie on this item? If not, is there a motion to approve the equipment? Motion by Martins, is there a second? Second by Herbst. We'll go ahead and vote then. Ryan?
No.
Herbst?
Aye.
Watson?
Aye.
Martins?
Aye.
I'll vote aye as well, and that item will pass 4-1. And then we've got about 5 minutes. I guess, Mary Ann, do you want to hold that report to the next meeting, or do you want to run through it quickly? You give us a quick overview? Sure.
So the revenues, I think we're holding our own. There are several areas that do show kind of a negative outlook for this year. One of them would be licensing because of the liquor licenses and the bartender licenses. Another area would be our fines and forfeitures. We're at 207,000. Last year we were at 275. And we most likely will not meet budget. Other areas Under public charges would be our parks and recreation. Our recreation and public areas will likely fall short. And then another, probably the biggest one would be our interest on investments. You can see we will meet budget, but when we compare to our investment returns last year to this year, we will see a big decline. And last year, when we looked at where we generated our profit, I think we were only under budget in expenses by $32,000. All of the profit that we generated last year was in the revenue. So it was because we exceeded our revenue predictions. So, and investment income was a big part of that function. So we won't see that as a huge revenue driver. Under expenses, there again, I think we are doing okay. Obviously, elections is significantly more expensive this year compared to last year, but we did get grants. You're seeing indications of additional positions that were authorized when you compare last year to this year. And then finally, two of the big underperformers would be the Department of Public Works due to the lack of snow, and Parks and Recreation due to the lack of summer activities. So again, right now, I'm predicting about a $600,000 profit. At our next meeting, I should have some better tentative numbers too.
Perfect. Excellent. And, while we have everybody here, we only have one council meeting during the month of December. If we don't have pressing business, given that we're running into the holidays that week, is the committee okay with then also canceling our second finance meeting for December and then just beginning again that second Tuesday of January? Okay, if we have pressing items, we'll hold it, but tentatively, let's plan on not having that second one then, if the council isn't meeting the same night. Okay, with that then, a motion to adjourn is acceptable. Motion by Herbst, is there a second? Second by Martins. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We'll stand adjourned and council can start in this chamber in just a couple minutes. Thanks, everyone.